Welcome to the Money Savvy Parents Podcast, the podcast for parents to gain financial education to then pass on through the generations. I am your host, Laura, mother to 3 beautiful children and founder of a financial coaching business, Savvy Peacocks. Let's remove the taboo from money together. Hello and welcome back to my podcast. This is episode 28 and today we're going to talk about your home and feeling good in it. So let's launch straight in and hear that question from the audience.
Hi Laura, we're wanting to start to invest in our home but not quite sure where we can start. Please, could you share any tips with us?
Thank you so much for bringing this question to light, because I think, if anything, we have all learnt over the last 18 months, 2 years, during a global pandemic, that our home needs to be a place where we feel safe, secure, happy and relaxed. It's got to be our number one agenda. Firstly, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Are we going to have another lockdown? Is something else going to come along that is similar? And also probably the way we view our home, maybe the way we view our life may well have changed substantially. So you may find you're spending more time at home. You may be working from home, which you wasn't before. Or you may actually choose to spend more time at home than you would have done previously. I know certainly for myself, I would be forever looking for reasons to leave my home. I might have shared on the podcast before that I have monophobia, which means that I really don't enjoy being on my own. So any moment I had in the past before sort of pre-pandemic, I would be out of my home. I'd be filling my time with as many different activities, seeing as many different people as possible. And the pandemic has actually taught me to fall back in love with my home and enjoy spending time here, because we have had no choice but to do that. And on top of that, you will have heard that I had a quite severe ankle injury. So not only did we have the pandemic, but even in that short period of time when you guys were all allowed out to have fun, I was still stuck in at home with my ankle injury. So for me, this subject's really important. To be investing in our home, it can be really powerful, but also to be thinking about how you're going to invest back in your home. So that's what I'm going to talk about today in this episode. And if not already listened to it, I would go back a few episodes to our bonus episode that was released just last week and have a listen to it, because it's all about feng shui and being able to create your happy space in your home, but also making your home work to the best advantage for you. So I think this episode really falls in nicely with that. So in order to make it your happy place, it's really important that you make it a place that you want to be and that you want to spend time in, even if it's just 1 or 2 rooms to begin with. You know, think about now, where do you spend the most amount of time in your home? Does anything in those rooms need to change? If so, what needs to change? Start writing a list and then work backwards from there. So focusing on just 1 or 2 rooms to begin with can really help. I've done quite a lot of changing around in my property and making it a nicer place for me to live. And some of it has just been as simple as changing the colours of the walls. Or I actually went to the extreme of changing the cupboard fronts in my kitchen because I wanted a more lighter area feel. So focusing in on 1 or 2 rooms that you spend a lot of time in and then making those the most optimum possible. And when you're doing this, I really want you to think about the return on investment. So when I say this, what I'm talking about is not only in monetary terms, but also the value it's going to add to your energy, the way it might change your family dynamics. So if you are going to invest, let's say your lounge needs some work and you maybe don't need to change the sofas and the big things there, but you might want to think about changing the curtains, changing the colours of the wall, maybe getting some new things up on the walls. You might say, okay, well, I need to spend around £400 in this room, and thinking about, okay, we guess that's £400, and it's not necessarily going to add value to your property because it's just making it nicer for you. But what value is it going to add to your energy? How is it going to make you feel? How are you going to be able to use that room differently in future? Are you going to want to spend more time in it? Does it mean that it will work better for your family? So thinking really clearly about what that return on investment is. And the other things I'd say with this is really be open to change, because things really do change over time. You know, your tastes change, the needs in which you will use that room might change. So really be mindful of that when you're choosing these changes within these few rooms, and think about how that might change over time. And something that I like to do with my clients is set yourself some future goals. So map out over the next 10 years, what does your living situation look like? So first of all, do you need to stay where you are, or do you need to make some plans to move? And what does that look like? Where might you move to? What do you need that new house to do for you, whether you're owning it or renting it? And doing those calculations to say, where do you want to get to? And then again, be able to work back through those. If you're in the house that you believe you can stay in for the next 10 years, then having to think about what might change over that time, where the children are going to get to, what their needs might be. So maybe they're going to start going into the years in school where they're going to need some space to do their homework. Or maybe they're going to turn into teenagers and they're going to want their friends to come over and stay more. So thinking very clearly about what the needs might be over the next 10 years, and then working through that around what you can do in your home to suit what's going on in your family. And if you're a creative person, you could think about creating a vision board and what that looks like, get some ideas down on paper and having something to work towards. I think there's nothing more rewarding than having something to work towards and being very clear on what the next 10 years might look like. And of course, as I said already, be open to change. These things evolve over time, things change over time. But if you can at least have an idea, you're not making a decision today that you're then going to have to change in a few years' time because something else is happening in a few years' time. Thinking now, okay, well, if I do this, then I'm, being aware that I'm going to have to change it to that again in a few years' time. So is there something I can do now to make it as amenable as possible? So I'll give you an example. When I started working at home, it was deciding, okay, which room do I want as my office? Because I'm going to need an office space. I've got 4 bedrooms. My bedroom is separate to that. So I've got 4 bedrooms for the children and my office. So who needs to be in what room based on their ages now and what they're going to need in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, as I said, which room's going to be best for me to stay in as my office so that I'm not having to change it all of the time. So, being very careful and purposeful about that means that I'm not going to have to change it every few years. I'm going to definitely stay in this office. Maybe the children are going to change rooms over that time. But being quite purposeful about that. And then the other 2 things I just want to talk to you about is how to fund these changes. So what I've talked about are some small changes. Maybe you want to get some different decor in a room, or maybe you actually want to go big and create a conservatory or change some of the windows or something a bit bigger. Then if you're looking at those bigger expenses, there's a few things to be considering is how to fund it. If you own your property, then of course this is what I'm talking about, because if you rent a property, there really is no point in making any of those big changes because you don't own that property. I would be talking to the landlord about maybe how he or she could make those changes which would add value to their property. But if it's your property, then what you're weighing up is what you're going to do add value to the property? So that's the first thing. So being clear in, okay, if I spend £10,000, is that going to add 10,000 or more to the value of the property? So maybe looking at the local market or speaking to a local estate agent, they may be able to give you an idea. And then when you're thinking about how to fund that, there's 2 things I would talk about is what savings have you got? So that is aside from your savings that I've talked about in previous episodes. So I'm not talking about dipping into your emergency fund or dipping into your sort of backup fund if you lose your job. I'm not talking about those savings. I'm talking about savings that you've deliberately saved up for renovation to your property. So the reason I always say about thinking about your savings is that the interest rates are so low right now. And so, of course, if you weigh that up with, okay, well, I can keep those savings in account, maybe I'll be lucky to get 1%. But if I took a loan or I added something onto my mortgage, that may well cost me 2, 3, 4%. So, of course, it makes more sense to use your savings because you're not going to earn 2, 3, 4% in interest right now on savings. So savings is one part of it. And maybe you want to do a bit of a hybrid and do some of your savings and some of it attached to your property. And a lot of people don't know that once you've got your first mortgage, when you buy your house, when you've got some equity in the property, you've actually got an option to take a loan against your mortgage, against your property, and it's called a homeowner loan. And it's basically a loan against the amount of mortgage you've got in comparison to the value of the property, and there's that figure in between. And really, lenders are looking to lend right up to sort of 90% these days of the value of your property. So have a look at how much your mortgage is versus how much the value of the property is, and then that will tell you how much you've got to play with. And what's quite nice about a homeowner loan is that normally the smallest amount you can borrow is £10,000, right up to, as I say, normally around 90% of your property value, dependent on your incomings and outgoings, of course. But it is a cheap way to borrow money. It's certainly cheaper than getting a personal loan. So maybe a personal loan, you might be lucky to get sort of a 3 or 4% personal loan. The average credit score, because it's all done on your credit score, would probably get you a personal loan of maybe 9, 10, 11%. So a homeowner loan at the same rate as mortgage rates, at maybe 2, 3% if you're on a lower credit scoring, a homeowner loan makes much more sense, particularly if it's for making renovation to your property, because it's going to be adding value to your property at the same time. So just in summary, I would say map out those next 10 years. What are you and your family going to need? Does your living situation need to change? If you're going to stay where you are, what does that look like? How are things going to map out? What needs to happen over that time? And I would also say think pretty big, because 10 years is a long amount of time. So if you want to say in 10 years' time, I want to have an outbuilding where it can be my office, then fine, plan that out, cost it out, work out how much it will take you to save it up, how are you going to get to that point, so that you've got a plan of action, and then really cover off your options once you've worked out what your return on investment is, and be really clear on what you're going to get back from making that investment back into your property. And as I already said, not just in monetary terms, but think about the value that it's going to add to your energy and your family dynamics. I really hope that helped today. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to having you on the podcast next time. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to Money Savvy Parents. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please subscribe and post your money questions within a review for future episodes. If you want to learn more, then please join my Money Savvy Parents Facebook group or club on Clubhouse. Let's remove the taboo from money together.